Research shows that poorly defined scope is the largest single barrier to project success. See, for instance, Smith and Tucker 1984, Gabelli and Larson 1986, and Larson and Gray in 2014. You don't have to look too far to find examples of egregious scope creep, the Scottish Parliament building being a perfect example in this regard. The Project Management Institute defines project scope as the work required, and only the work required, to complete the project successfully. The project scope defines and documents the purpose and intent of the project, and what is included and excluded. You may refer to the project scope document as the Statement of Work, the Project Definition Report, or the Project Charter, but its constituent parts should always be the same. The scope should state the project's purpose and intent, the what, the when, and the how much of the project. It should list the deliverables or outputs of the project. It should list the milestones, the key steps on the project timeline. The scope should also describe the high-level technical requirements and acceptance criteria for the project, and really importantly, should also highlight what is out of scope, the project limits and exclusions. Two really important tasks associated with defining project scope are to capture the scope and to communicate it. During the capturing phase, we are talking to the various stakeholders in the project, aiming to identify, discuss and negotiate what the real requirements of the project are. Although stakeholders may very well initially have different views of what the project should entail, ultimately, through this process of discussion and negotiation, we should be able to come to an agreed position of what the project scope is. If we can't, then a whole different set of alarm bells should start ringing in the project manager's head about the desirability and feasibility of the project. Having agreed the scope, we now need to communicate it, going back to the key stakeholders, stating very clearly what the scope is and equally importantly what is out of scope. The PMBOK describes a more lengthy 5-step process of scope definition. Here, collecting requirements is about talking to the customer and stakeholders and documenting what they want from the project. The project manager is not responsible at this stage for meeting these requirements, but must manage the requirements, prioritising, negotiating and capturing the essence of the project. Defining scope is then coming to an agreement with the key stakeholders about what requirements, work and tasks lie within the remit of the project. Clearly defining the scope then enables the project manager to manage these agreed requirements. Stage 3, creating the work breakdown structure, the WBS of the project, is about developing a structure for the project. It breaks the project down into deliverables and sub-deliverables, which enables responsibilities for completion to be assigned and the time and costs to be tracked. These 3 steps are of course an iterative process, with each one informing the next in a process of dialogue, discussion and documentation until a final detailed scope and work breakdown structure are produced. Step 4 of the process is then to verify the scope. For example, do the deliverables meet the required scope? Can the customer acceptance criteria be met? Can all the stakeholders sign off on the scope? Step 5 is to manage the scope. This topic is covered in more detail in other units of this course, as it's clear that in the real world, scope will often change, or at least come under pressure to change during the course of the project. New information may come to light, or business circumstances may change. The important thing, however, is for the project manager to remain in control of the scope rather than letting it control us. Defining project scope well is a challenging task for any project manager, not least due to the time or organisational pressures to get started on the project. However, get the project scope right, and the project manager has laid the foundations for a successful project.